Unlock the high returns of the expanding venture capital world right here on the Emerging Managers Podcast.
Hi, you got two guys on today. You got Suncoast Venture Studio. We've got Travis Priest and Will Dolan, partners in the firm, and they have pretty interesting backgrounds between the two of them. I mean,
yeah, they don't come from your traditional, angel VC, background. And honestly, I think for what they're trying to accomplish in the region they're trying to accomplish it provides real value. I'm here in Tampa Bay. They're only a stone's throw away, up in Sarasota, but they have a mission to make Sarasota, put that on the proverbial entrepreneur startup investor map. And I think they bring a really interesting perspective of it's more than just capital. It's something else. And they bring a lot of the something else.
So I have spent a lot of time in Sarasota because I belong to a mastermind group, and they had 5 events a year in Sarasota. So I loved it. It's a great little town. It's got, a great little city. It's got great food and everything. But I love that they're starting to work towards it becoming this venture hub. I think that's a really great location. But the most interesting thing about the two of them were, their background. Travis Priest came from NASA contracting.
Yeah.
Exit to Symantec. It's a wealth of experience in the startup world and in this kind of, I'm going to call it high level startup world with lots of intellectual property floating around, lots of expertise, lots of technical background items that are going through that space. That is a really good perspective.
And obviously being, in the space industry gives you a lot of interesting experience and some interesting dynamics,
Yeah, market dynamics, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so and I think sometimes when you're trying to build something different, you have to have something different. And that difference is your background and experience. And I think, both of them bring, like I mentioned before, a non-traditional investor experience, but they bring a wealth of high level, high end, business and government experience.
Well, and Will Dolan, I love that he called himself a reformed corporate executive. I think that's a great title. But, with so much fintech and financial services background, that's a really interesting balance between the two. Fidelity Investments, holding company overseeing all kinds of business. So he's done it at, a holding company level. So, you're talking about different stages of all kinds of things. And then, go to the fintech startup tap engineer. It's just great commercial expertise that he has.
Well, that's the thing too, because I think, Will, obviously that fintech experience and that holding company experience really provides the ability to provide entrepreneurs that perspective on how to manage a business. And I think that's something that really is important because a lot of entrepreneurs have great ideas, but they need help in the execution as much as they need help in funding.
Absolutely. Well, let's hear from Travis Priest and Will Dolan about Suncoast Venture Studio.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Scott Kelly. I am the founder and CEO of Black Dog Venture Partners and your host for the Emerging Managers Podcast. And I'm excited to welcome Travis and Will from the Suncoast Venture Studio. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us, Scott.
What I want to do now is get a little background on both of you prior to launching what you're doing with the studio. So we'll start with you, Travis, and then Will.
I am a serial entrepreneur. My first foray into building a venture was back in 1996 when Clinton and Gingrich shut down the government. A government contractor at NASA. A few of us engineers there looked at each other and decided that we were upset with the idea of being non-essential, and we got together, found some NASA technology to take to the public market, built a company. I did not return in January when the government resumed operations. Instead, I stayed and worked on the startup as employee number 1. And 3 years and a few months later, we exited to Symantec Corporation. It was a very nice exit 1 month before the internet bubble burst. And for 4 years and a day, I worked for Symantec. So you can guess how long my earnout was. And after that time, left and created a series of other startups. More successes than not, but not everything I've touched has turned to gold as anybody else's story. But I've had a series of successes along the line. Relocated back to Sarasota, which is home for me, and got involved in Bridge Angel Investors. So I'm an angel investor with a number of others in that group. And the opportunity came up to do more than just invest in other founders. I wanted to create some more businesses. And I joke with friends now, because one startup at a time is not enough for me. I'm going to do 5 at a time. And the studio is born.
Fantastic. Well, share a little about your background.
Sure. So I'm a reformed corporate executive who found venture investing and venture creation as the sort of second chapter in my career. I started, early in the days in financial services technology before they called it fintech, and I built a number of businesses and institutions inside of a large company like Fidelity Investments, where I spent a big chunk of my time. I left Fidelity after a successful turnaround of a software company, and I got hired away by a private equity firm where I was CEO of a holding company where I ran 3 different businesses: a wealth management firm, a data business, and a very kind of bespoke, complex software business under a singular portfolio there. Following that, I got the pure entrepreneurial bug, and I built, or in the process of building, a fintech startup that serves the needs of credit unions, community banks, other financial intermediaries. And I'm currently the president and co-founder of a company called Tap Engine, which just completed a successful Series A raise back a few months ago. On the side, I'm also a member of Bridge Angel Investors. I moved my family from the Boston area down to Sarasota about 2.5 years ago. Was fortunate enough to meet with Travis, and we share a lot of interest in our community, but also in building and creating opportunities in the Suncoast area down here. And so that as such, the venture studio has been formed. So I'm happy to be a part of that, and also to be here on your show.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. Well, yeah, actually, I moved to the area about 2.5 years ago, and I live in St. Pete. Love it. Absolutely.
Nice.
So John, share a little bit about your thesis. How you're investing, what you're investing in, what your model is for the venture studio.
So our thesis is that we live in what we describe as a tertiary market. We want to build a tech ecosystem here in Sarasota. And if you look in a primary market, consider San Francisco, New York, Atlanta, Austin, even Miami now, you think of those as primary markets. An engineer will roll up into the parking lot at their job, open the door, and business plans may fall out of their car as they're getting into work, or they'll take a business plan into the local coffee shop, and an investor may happen to walk by at the time. And very quickly, they can get traction with investors, seek funding, build their company, and have other co-founders in. So that happens very commonly in a primary market. In a secondary market, like Orlando or Tampa or these other large cities, you see some successful incubators and accelerators form. An entrepreneur will come in, go through those educational programs, get introduced to the affiliated investors. And after the program, there's a good chance that the entrepreneur will land there in that area, in Tampa, say, through Embark, and form their business and bring other people in to work on their business with them. In a tertiary market like Sarasota, where the tech ecosystem still needs to be built and it's much smaller, we think if we ran an accelerator or an incubator here to attract entrepreneurs in with their ideas, we think we would run them through the program, and at the end, they would actually relocate to a larger market in order to build their business. And that doesn't actually reach the ends that we want to have, which is where we're actively involved in these. So the studio model from that perspective works really well for us. We take our ideas, we vet them, build business plans, build the MVP, do the market testing. And if it looks like it's a promising idea, we will then bring in a co-founder and grant them equity in our business. But the studio is the institutional founder. It is our business. We invite in experienced co-founders to run our business, and we have them establish it here. We work with them directly hands-on, and we have unique things that we can offer that co-founder. Sarasota is home to a significant number of retired Fortune 500 executives and others that have exited their business. These folks cannot play golf 5 days a week. They need other things to keep their minds engaged. So we have a willing and knowledgeable base of mentors that want to interact with these founders. And we also have a significant amount of investment capital that we can redirect to be invested here into ventures that are formed out of Sarasota as opposed to exiting our community. So it's a...
Will, you want to add anything?
No, I think Travis summed it up nicely. I think we've seen our community is really focusing on beyond all the great philanthropy that exists around here, looking at new ways to invest in the community and deploy capital. And why not do it in where we have an opportunity to create jobs for the area and build a sort of a tech hub in Sarasota and surrounding counties that could really add to the economic base here in our community. We're very excited about that.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I grew up in New York and lived and worked in San Francisco and LA in the hotbeds of tech and venture capital. So it's exciting to see, you know, these tertiary markets, you know, and secondary markets, you know, get the respect and the opportunities that they would normally get, you know. And so I'm excited about your endeavor. Joe, are you going to be raising a fund? Are you going to be making equity investments, or what's the model when you bring in this other entrepreneur to run the company?
So it's a two-part model. One, we are raising capital for the studio itself. The studio's business is to create ventures. So it's a company that builds companies. And we'll need capital within the studio to operate and begin the studio on its process. Secondarily, when we launch a venture, that's basically a Delaware C corporation, as you would expect from any other venture that you would invest in as a private investor. And we bring in a co-founder or two that is experienced. We put them on the cap table. We grant them a significant portion of equity in that business because we want them to work 125% of their time, just like you would in your own venture. And then we raise pre-seed or seed investment, depending on what we think the stage of the business is at that point. That capital will come from two sources. One, we will raise a fund that is primarily focused on investing in ventures that we produce, but not solely dedicated to that. It can be opportunistic and invest in other places. But it's very important early on, I think, to get external validation, which means we do want external investors who preferably are strategic in the industry that we're approaching, that will also co-invest with our fund along the side. That external validation and external participation by other investors early in the process we see as early validation in what we're doing is correct.
So what's maybe you shared a little bit about your background, but have you been implementing this model currently? And if so, maybe share some success stories or, you know, companies that are developing from this model.
So I've been an entrepreneur in residence with a VC firm for about 5 or 6 years now. I have a good relationship with the managing directors there. I was their first investment and exit over a decade ago, and they're on raising fund 4 now. Mm-hmm. And during that time, that VC had a startup studio, if you will, a little incubator to try to launch off a few companies. That effort, I felt, was interesting, but really needed to be formalized. So what we're doing with the studio is we have a very concrete venture formation process, which typically as an investor, you'll see a pitch deck with the standard 10 Sequoia slides, problem, solution, market, why now, team, all those slides. And you'll get a 20-minute presentation from the founder pitching you for money. And as an investor in the diligence data room, you have to do a lot of diligence to make sure that the founder has thought about their business. From my perspective, I'm a little more old school. And I'd like to see us build an entire business plan, a well thought out 60-page business plan with all the market research, all the go-to-market strategy, and all the other pieces, the things that you need. I think that rigor has been lost in some of our VC optimization pieces. So our venture formation process includes building those plans and debating them aggressively in our team to make sure that we have a plan that makes sense and can go forward and that we can follow. Once we've done that, We launch these businesses based on those plans and adapt those plans as we go. That process works. I've done that multiple times. I've always had some bit of discipline in creating those plans and thinking about the businesses before I launch them, which I think has led me to more successes and failures. And we're going to follow that process in the studio. And in fact, we're building an AI around that process. And our intention is to make that process available to other studios and other VC firms that want to evaluate other businesses against this formation template. So in the end of the day, that's our special sauce for making sure that we're doing the right thing with investors' money.
Well, how does your background, play into this model that Travis just went through?
So as we ideate and prepare these companies for formation and successful launch, I bring a lot of commercial reality to the equation here, which is no venture is successful until it has the opportunity to not just identify an addressable market, but be able to realize revenue and become a going concern. And so my focus on the companies that I've built, the ones I've turned around, and the ones that I've led have really all been focused on how do you generate and maintain a good source of revenue and sustainability and growth for the entities. So my contribution will not only provide sort of the general leadership experience that I've gotten managing a number of different firms, but also really harnessing on how these companies will go to market and be successful. And also to be mentoring and working with the founders that we bring in place to run these and provide some good, support and guidance along the way to do that. I also have spent a lot of time on the fundraising side and working not only in private equity, but doing fundraising with angels and strategic investments and other sort of sources of capital that will help not only get the studio liquid to begin our operations, but also to help create the necessary capital to afford and fund the deal flow that will be coming through as we launch these ideas, multiple 3 to 4 a year, making sure that we have the right liquidity and the right focus on capital in place. And so part of that will be bringing in outside advisors, we'll be bringing in the funds that we need and working with various, not only the individuals in our community, but outside organizations that are interested in participating in early stage ventures like this as well.
So Travis, obviously you guys are creating the businesses and then bringing someone else to help run them or co-operate them. So you're not looking at the outside deal flow. So how are you determining what businesses and what industries are you going to get involved in?
The most common question that I'm asked lately is, where do the ideas come from? Right. And that seems to be the least of our problems to solve. Ideas are a dime a dozen. The question is, what are the good ideas? What are the ones that have the ability to get market traction, address a market with a large enough TAM, have a go-to-market strategy that does not the equivalent of boiling the ocean to get the product in? So these ideas come from a number of places. One, internally, when you look at our advisory group and their experiences in the workspace, we get a number of ideas coming from our advisory group, and those are internal ideas that we build these plans around and vet and decides if they're valid to go to market. The other place for ideas are companies and government organizations that have problems to solve that maybe we can help them with and commercialize those along the way. And another source of ideas are tech transfer opportunities. So when you look around, Sarasota is the southwest anchor of the Florida Innovation Corridor. We have several universities here that are creating technology, and we have several research institutions here within our area, some that were born and raised right here. We're having discussions with those groups, trying to create a three-way partnership between the entity with the technology, the studio as the commercialization arm, because often the person who investigates the technology isn't an expert in actually commercializing it. And then third, investors who are interested in the technology as it applies to their investment space and thesis. That triangle of power, if you will, is what can help launch a successful venture. So we're looking for our ideas across a broad spectrum of sources.
Thanks for that. So Will, you mentioned bringing in some outside capital. So we're really talking about what you're building and the companies that you're building. But obviously, let's talk to potential investors. Obviously, the reason I put together this podcast is there are 3,200 venture capital funds and 1,800 fund ones. But according to an article, late last year, 78% went to 18 of the monolithic venture capital funds. And so the premise of this podcast is to cast a light on others that could get better, alpha, better returns because they're not so monolithic and, quite frankly, working off a carrot. So to someone who would want to invest in the studio, Will, what would you tell them? Why your fund, why your studio, and why now versus everybody else?
So let me answer that shortly and then give Travis a chance to add to it. I think both of us provide a different perspective on that. But I think the track record that Travis and I possess and our success record in the industry is demonstrative of the fact that we know how to get businesses launched. We know how to go from 0 to 1 and get products out the door. That's I think track record is a key part of it. I think the idea generation, as Travis articulated in the last comment, the way we come up with ideas and how we focus on them is sort of a second. We're not just looking at the same deal flow that everybody else is looking at. We're actually ideating and generating new ideas for the industry, which is not something that every firm gets access to. The third piece of this is our focus on AI and our technology background, and everything that we're going to be doing is going to leverage that knowledge, including the way in which we, as Travis indicated, that we bring companies to market using AI as a incredibly efficient way. Instead of taking months of spreadsheets and PowerPoints and lengthy documents, we can create in hours and minutes a very robust set of materials to do the evaluation, and then use the tool to do other types of evaluation. So that AI component, I think, is something that is very unique to the way that we approach it. So those are some of my top reasons that I think investors would be interested. If they have a tech mindset, if they want proven, executives like us who have been there and done that and can help lead these businesses to fruition, I think those are some of the key elements that will drive interest in our studio and also the investment in the companies that we're going to be asking for.
All right, thanks, Will. Travis, you want to add to that?
I do. I have a different perspective. The studio model is quite powerful. So when you think about the capital, I'm very familiar with the research that you just quoted, that 70% of the raised capital last year went to 30% of the largest firms. That creates a big problem for them. Now, when you have this several $100 million or $1 billion fund, you have to write a pretty large check to move the needle and return alpha to your investors. In a studio perspective, it's a little bit different. Think about when you are a VC and you're investing in Series A or Series B, you are writing a fairly large check for a company of that size for a relatively smaller position on the cap table. And as that company moves through its funding rounds, you dilute along with the next rounds. That's why we have things like liquidation preference and preferred shares to sort of buffer against that dilution in the out years. But think about a studio. A studio is 100% of the cap table on day one. And then it allocates portions of that cap table to the founder and the employees and then to investors that goes in. But even after a Series A or Series B round, the studio still has a dominant position in the cap table, a very respectable position on the cap table, which means that a lower valuation, we don't have to build unicorns. We don't even necessarily have to build $100 million businesses, although we plan to do so. But we do not have to do that to return respectable returns to our investors. Because our position on the cap table is so large, we will actually bring an outsized portion of any exit value, any liquidity value from those entities back to our investors. That's the power of the studio model.
So let's close with a couple of last questions. So I'll start with Will. Anything else you want to share with the listeners today, Will? And then I'll ask Travis the same question.
I think the real key here is the differentiation that Travis has described about what a studio is versus an incubator or an accelerator, and why a studio is opportunistic now, and how that studio can be really transformative to the community that we're here working within, and all of the network of folks in that community who were helping generate ideas for the studio to launch these companies. I think that studio concept is really something to latch onto, that I want potential investors and listeners to understand, how that is different and how that is meaningful in the sense of a new way to invest and to create value for their investments.
Great, Travis. Any final thoughts?
I do. I love pitching the studio because, I've pitched and raised capital for years for my ventures. And now I'm doing that again, obviously, because I'm raising money for the studio and I'm raising money for the ventures that we go out. And that's going to be a reality for the rest of my working career is I will be raising money. But the other interesting thing about pitching for the studio is I don't necessarily have to go out, and a win doesn't necessarily mean I get a check written for the studio or a venture. I can also seek mentors and people who are willing to be engaged and able. So there's multiple ways for me to win when I do a pitch now, and it's refreshing and a lot of fun. I also learn a tremendous number of things along the way. I'm getting to touch more industries than I could do it single-threaded, and it's been an interesting journey for me, and I'm excited to be on it.
Travis, Will, where can we learn more about Suncoast and yourself?
So you can visit suncoast.studio, which is our website. We also produce an AI podcast version. So this is the real thing that you're doing here. We're actually talking human beings, but we have some AIs. We're using Google Notebook LM to create a short podcast each week of just topics that variously interest me. So you can visit our website and you can listen to our podcast. And not before you listen to yours, obviously, Scott. I won't pitch it over you.
Not a problem.
And definitely reach out to us via email. We're right on the website.
Fantastic. Well, where can they contact you and learn more about yourself?
I think the best way to do it is through the studio website, and you can reach us directly. LinkedIn profiles are on our website, and we're very happy to engage directly to get people excited and those who are interested. And it's not, as Travis said, it's not just investing. We've met people along this journey where we've engaged with them and they've decided that they want to, maybe not invest, but they want to be an advisor to a company, and they've got a particular background in manufacturing or biology or some discipline that we could really leverage. So, we're building a network of folks that are going to be affiliated and partnering with us in a lot of different ways. And so I think it's a great way to connect with all of these folks down here in this great place that we live. And I'm really excited about it. So reach out directly, connect with me on LinkedIn. And then we can go from there.
Fantastic. Well, Travis, thanks for being on the show today. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Scott.
We've heard this term studio a few times now, Scott. I think this is kind of emerging into a trend in of itself. What do you think of the studio model?
Well, I mean, I think, it's interesting. When I first heard the studio model, I just thought they were putting another name on incubator accelerator. And in some cases they are. But at the core, the studio concept, if you look at it from a movie standpoint, a studio provides all kinds of things, from the actors to the directors to the videographers to the editors to the background. So they create everything in order to come up with the finished product, and this is the same concept applying here, because I think, we spoke about this in the intro, is that having capital is great. Having expertise is better. Having both is ideal.
Exactly. Having both is ideal. And then I am hearing more about this tertiary market. I mean, we talked about that at the beginning about Sarasota being their tertiary market, but where there's just emerging around the country and great, we were talking about it when we were interviewing about the Canadian market and other things like that there needed to be these pockets of full service innovation, right? Being able to not only start a business here, but be able to hire, be able to provide all the tech needed, all the infrastructure, all the things needed to keep a business in this market.
Well, and you'll find a lot of the, city government, city leaders want to develop these things because at the end of the day, it builds more employees, more homes being built, and more residents. And I think that, there's a lot of markets that are just underserved. They may be a tertiary market, but they still have primary entrepreneurs. And I think just because someone makes a lifestyle change to live in a smaller market doesn't mean they should not have the opportunity to build a big business.
Yeah, and here's one also where they were talking about this rigor lost with business plans, right? Like this idea that the foundation for everything that they're doing has this rigorous structure to it, which I think is necessary when you're going to build in a smaller market area where you don't have as many choices. Like, a failure in that market is a bigger deal.
No, and you have to have that discipline. And I think the fact that they come to entrepreneurs with that discipline, because you and I have both, been entrepreneurs and have dealt with hundreds, if not thousands of entrepreneurs. And, sometimes they get a little, following the squirrel mentality, and they don't stay focused. And
Imagine that.
I think, and having that rigor, keeps you focused, and it provides a real opportunity to, make the losses not as severe and make the successes better.
Yeah. And I do think, though, that idea sourcing, right? Like that concept of idea sourcing is so critically important when you're going to get a fair shake on your idea. Like you're going to get them to really deeply look at it. Because I can say, how many times have I done, a fast pitch, and I love doing them and I'm really good at them. But I'm so desperate for somebody to actually read the whole story, to actually dive in and understand how deep this really goes, and it's not just the surface. So I think that's an attractor for a good founder.
I agree. I think they want to develop companies themselves and bring people to bear. I mean, one of the things they mentioned is that they are coming up with ideas and then getting people to fill in, the roles in those ideas. So I think, that not only provides them an opportunity to invest and help companies, they have the ability to build companies and bring in the resources to do that.
And the mentorship. I mean, this is we talked about, my very first business, I had a score mentor. Mm-hmm. And, that was the only way you could get it, was to get someone who was retired, right? I mean, otherwise it was just my dad who wasn't retired at the time, but, it was just my dad's word. So I think that the community, specifically Sarasota, with so many great retirees from fabulous companies, from good exits themselves, I think they really do have a ripe opportunity for that.
Right. And honestly, a lot of the folks that have been very successful around the country, around the world, are retired or living a more calm life in Sarasota. And if they have time and they have interest, why not take advantage of it?
Why not? Absolutely. Well, Sarasota's just up, down from where you are.
They are.
I think it's technically
they are north
down,
of
right?
where I am. Yes.
It's like over.
Right.
Yeah, I've driven it before. I actually was at an event in St. Pete and then went to my event in Sarasota. So I've driven it before. It's beautiful.
Yep.
So have you gotten over there to see them yet, or are you going to?
I haven't. I am scheduled to go to an event and host an event there. Because they are building, they have physical incubators and facilities. We contemplated doing an event there. We probably more than likely have that on the calendar, in the next 6 months or so.
Well, everyone, if you haven't heard me say this before, you got to go to emergingmanagerspodcast.com. Make sure you check on what's going on there. We try to link to the VC Fast Pitch events and anything else that's going on in our world so that you can connect and hear more from these wonderful investors. And I have to tell you that over the years, I have done a lot of events. And Scott, your events always have quality traffic at a high level and a large group. Like, it's never small. It's always a valuable group, and it's large enough that it makes it really worth the while to go.
And I'm thankful for that. The reality is I've been doing this for a while, and I've built some really good relationships with investors from around the country. And, places like Sarasota, they might not have all the investors in that market. So, I've made it one of my agenda items here and other places I've been is to bring outside investors to see new opportunities in new markets.
Absolutely. Well, we'll try to cover them. We're going to meet these connections that Scott has made throughout our show, Emerging Managers Podcast. Thank you all for being here, and be back next week with another interview.
Take care.
Join Scott Kelly, Tracy Hazard, and their high-performing capital fund manager guest next week on the Emerging Managers Podcast. Don't miss our upcoming virtual and live VC Fast Pitch and podcast events. For more details, background on our guests, or an application to be our next guest, visit emergingmanagerspodcast.com. Don't miss out on shaping the future of venture capital and entrepreneurship with us by joining our robust community of innovators and investors today.